Someone was using her Facebook after she vanished. But Bethany Decker hadn't been seen in weeks. Her phone, wallet, and car untouched. Her boyfriend claimed she left. Her family said she never would. Then he confessed, said she fell, said he panicked, said he threw her body down a trash compactor. But there's still no body, no baby, no evidence she ever left that apartment alive. So who was sending those Facebook messages? What did Bethany fear that day? And what really happened inside that home? Over the next hour, we'll follow digital breadcrumbs and buried lies to uncover how a young pregnant mother vanished and why her final moments remain hidden in silence. Bethany Decker had always been someone who carried more than her share of weight. At just 21, she was juggling college courses at George Mason University, a part-time job at an Italian restaurant, and full-time motherhood. She had a young son, barely a year old. Her husband, Emil, was often away on deployment with the Army National Guard, leaving her to manage school, work, and parenting on her own. She did it all, quietly, constantly, with no room for error. She was 5 months pregnant with her second child when she disappeared. Just days before, she had flown to Hawaii to spend a week with Emil during his leave. By most accounts, the trip was tense. Their relationship had been deteriorating. They were young, overwhelmed, and growing apart. Bethany returned to Virginia on January 28, 2011. The next day, January 29th, was the last time anyone outside her apartment would ever hear from her. She sent a message to her workplace to confirm a shift. That was it. No more calls, no texts, no appearances at school, nothing. And no one noticed, at least not right away. Bethany was the kind of person people assumed was always busy. She had responsibilities, a hectic schedule. When she didn't answer, friends chalked it up to stress. Her family figured she was overwhelmed. Even Emil, back in Afghanistan, assumed the silence was just distance. But time passed. Days stretched into weeks, and then something strange happened. Bethany's Facebook profile began to stir. New status updates appeared. Messages were sent. Friends responded casually at first, thinking she was just checking in. But something was off. The tone wasn't quite right. The way she wrote, the way she spoke, it felt artificial, like someone mimicking her, wearing her online like a mask. And yet no one had seen her. Not a classmate, not a coworker, not a single neighbor. Her phone remained silent, her bank accounts untouched, her ID, her cards, everything she owned, exactly where it had been. Bethany's family became concerned enough to act. On February 19, 3 full weeks after she vanished, her grandparents drove to her apartment in Ashburn. They didn't find her. What they found was her car, parked crooked, dust layered thick across the windshield. One tire was flat. It hadn't moved in days, maybe longer. They knocked. No answer. Inside her apartment, stillness. No sign of a struggle, no chaos, no cleanup, but no Bethany. That's when the missing person report was finally filed. But by then, the trail had already cooled. The digital illusion of her presence had delayed everything. Whoever had access to her accounts kept the world guessing just long enough for her to disappear completely. Police questioned the people closest to her. Emil was still overseas, but there was someone else, someone living with her, someone the family barely knew. Ronald Roldan. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He had moved into her apartment. He had a history of violence. He told officers Bethany walked out that day after a fight, said she needed space, said she'd be back. But she never came back. And slowly, suspicion turned toward the only man who had been with her when the world lost track. The silence, the staged Facebook posts. It didn't add up. For years, no one could prove what happened. No one could say exactly when she disappeared or how. There was no body, no crime scene, no physical evidence that said this was anything more than a woman who chose to walk away. Except she didn't. She left behind her son, her unborn child, her job, her school, her life. And behind that silence, something much darker was waiting to be uncovered. If Bethany was gone, then who was pretending she wasn't? Bethany Decker's life was held in the fragile balance between two men. One was her husband, Emil, a devoted soldier deployed to Afghanistan, and the father of their toddler son. The other was Ronald Roldan, a man she met at Carrabba's, who became her secret boyfriend and eventually moved into her apartment in late 2010. This wasn't a simple love triangle. It was a collision of desperation and deceit. Emil and Bethany had married in 2009, and their baby arrived 6 months later. The young family's hopes collided with the harsh reality of military life, months apart, emotional distance, and heavy stress. Despite returning from duty and taking a brief vacation to Hawaii with Bethany in January 2011, the fractures in their marriage were evident. Back in Virginia, Bethany grew close to Ronald. He was charming and attentive in a way that stood in stark contrast to the distance created by deployments. He joined her life in more ways than one, moving into her apartment and offering companionship. But soon enough, his love didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a cage. Family members later recounted how he became possessive, demanding photos, demanding her attention, monitoring her movements. By late 2010, Bethany discovered she was pregnant again, this time with Ronald's child. The news should have been a joyous revelation, but under Roldan's roof, it only increased the control he asserted over her. Suddenly, her life had more at stake than ever. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, the tension built. Roldan's clinic of fear wasn't hypothetical. In 2015, a former girlfriend, Vicky Willoughby, shared with police that Ronald had once said he could make people disappear. He'd make similar threats to Bethany, and according to her mother, once threatened to cut her with car keys if she tried to leave. Even as she quietly pieced together an escape plan, he watched. Then came January 28th, 2011. Emal was home on leave. They went to Hawaii. The two tried to salvage what remained of their marriage, but the undercurrent of tension was still there. Back home the next day, Bethany returned to her apartment. Roldan said he saw her later. Emil said he had just dropped her off. Later that day, she called work to confirm her shift, and then nothing. Two conflicting narratives emerged. Emil believed Bethany was worn down by the fragility of their marriage, but could never imagine she'd vanish. Roldan claimed she walked out after a fight and never returned. Between them, only one had motive, access, and opportunity, and only one still had a home that he controlled. While Bethany struggled to keep her roles from collapsing, mother, student, pregnant partner, she lived under continuous pressure. Classmates recall her as distant in the final semester. Co-workers at Carrabba's saw her distracted behind the counter. To friends, she appeared stressed, overwhelmed, yet determined to make it through the semester. But there were no witnesses to her next steps. No voice calls, no texts, just silence in an apartment shared with a secret lover who watched and waited. And weeks later, it became clear something else had waited too, a cover-up. Facebook posts appeared from Bethany's account, but the tone didn't match. Friends noticed, but missed the warning signs just long enough for her to disappear completely. For Bethany, living with Ronald meant dancing on a razor's edge. She wanted to leave him. She tried to leave him, already fearful of what he might do. Now, as we move into part 3, we'll uncover the man behind those threats, how violence shaped their relationship, and how that private terror pushed them toward a devastating end. He had told someone that he could make people disappear. And when fear becomes real, a hidden life can become a fatal trap. Behind closed doors in that Ashburn apartment, Ronald Roldan's presence began to eclipse Bethany's world. He didn't arrive as a savior. He crept in as a disruptor. Bethany had entered into that relationship seeking comfort, but instead found a man whose kindness soon turned into control. Family members would later recall how Roldan's demands became suffocating. He insisted Bethany send him selfies throughout the day, proof she was where she said, proof she wasn't with someone else. When she worked her waitressing shifts at Carrabba's or attended classes at George Mason, he would text for updates continuously. His tone, once affectionate, grew possessive. If she took too long to respond, he called. If she spent time with friends, he questioned. Each "I love you" slowly shifted into, "Where are you? Who are you with?" It wasn't just psychological. In time, it became physical. Bethany's own mother later described finding bruises on her daughter's arms, subtle and easily hidden, an aftermath of arguments she never talked about. She saw the fear deepen in Bethany's eyes, a warning sign she cared too little to act upon fast enough. Each missed call and late text, each bruised arm, chipped away at her. She felt trapped inside that tiny apartment and in her mind. She confided in a friend once, whispering during a break between classes, "I'm not safe." The words landed like bombs. Even then, other people urged her to leave him. Get out before it's too late. But fear doesn't make decisions easy. Fear makes you accept invitations to dinner that you cancel at the last minute, because you dread what happens when you don't. Fear keeps you silent when the walls feel like they're closing in. Friends say she seemed to pull away from them. She stopped laughing at their jokes. She stopped talking about future plans. Instead, her conversations circled back to Roldan and the next fight. They posted in hushed tones on each other's walls. She smiled in pictures, but her eyes told another story. There were whispers of someone calling the police, about him shouting in the apartment late at night. But when officers arrived, the door closed before they knocked. No names were taken, no formal reports were filed. There was no paper trail, no trumpet sounding red flag here, just neighborhood silence. And that silence proved dangerous. As February rolled on, Bethany's isolation deepened. She stopped answering calls from family. She stopped attending classes. To outside observers, she was just overwhelmed. But her family sensed something was horribly wrong. Her grandparents came by. Her mother tried texting. There was no answer, no explanation, only silence. But the house didn't fall quiet. It grew heavier. Because inside its walls, the pressure built. And Roldan, the man she had once trusted, became the axis of her fear. Not even he knew she was planning to leave him. Or maybe he did. It's hard to know which is scarier, a woman willing to walk away or a man who can't let her. On the day she vanished, she texted a friend that same phrase, "I'm not safe." The friend never responded. But those words echo through the case with a chilling clarity. Because safety had left Bethany's life and held out no hand to bring her back. But the danger didn't end with her disappearance. It just changed form. When Bethany Decker vanished, it wasn't just her physical presence that disappeared. It was her digital footprint as well. But beneath the quiet, a storm of silent clues started forming. Police quickly noted her phone was dead silent. No incoming or outgoing calls, no texts. Even her bank and ATM activity fell to zero after her shift confirmation at 2:08 p.m. on January 29, 2011, meaning her world went dark almost immediately afterward. Meanwhile, her Facebook account remained active. Someone kept posting and replying. But it wasn't Bethany. Authorities eventually subpoenaed Facebook, and the IP logs revealed a chilling connection. Those posts came from the same network access point tied to Ronald Roldan's home, either the apartment or Roldan's mother's house. This wasn't an accidental cross-posting. Someone with her credentials was pretending to be her, trying to slow the panic, hide the fact she was gone. Police zeroed in on Roldan. They believed he had posed as her to delay scrutiny. He had the ID, the keys, even left a key fob to her car at his mother's home, raising red flags about how deep his access was. When officers confronted him, his story shifted. At first he said she walked out after an argument. Then he claimed he ran errands alone, returned to discover she never came home. He couldn't recall what she wore, where she was headed, or whether she'd taken her phone with her. Investigators turned to Emil to compare alibis and motives. Emil, despite being overseas at the time, came home, cooperated fully, and even took a polygraph. He passed, no signs of deceit, but for all the phone logs, IP traces, and shaky admissions, law enforcement lacked the crucial element, physical evidence. No crime scene, no blood, no body, nothing you could tag, bag, or analyze in a lab. Searches of nearby fields and his residences turned up, nothing. That void left the case trapped in a digital echo chamber. Authorities could suggest inference and build narrative, but they couldn't prove what actually happened inside that apartment. Without a body or forensic proof, every question lingered. Yet, as the investigation sputtered, something else was happening in parallel. Roldan shifted focus. While police hunted for physical remains, he began plotting his future. The Facebook ruse bought him time. Shifting stories and false alibis bought him distance. And by the time detectives pressed for access, he had already started to withdraw, moving residences, deleting phone records, and preparing for his next move. And while police searched for a body, Roldan was already planning his next move. 3 years after Bethany disappeared, Ronald Roldan's trail of violence caught up with him once more, this time far from Virginia, in a North Carolina home where yet another life hung in the balance. The warning signs that once whispered in Ashburn turned into a deafening alarm. In 2014, Roldan entered into a relationship with a new woman, Vicki Willoughby, who later moved with him to Pinehurst, North Carolina. Their relationship, initially similar to Bethany's, descended rapidly into chaos. On the night of November 12th, Vicki called 911. Dispatchers arrived to a scene of utter horror. She had been physically assaulted by Roldan, her neck broken in 2 places, her body battered. In self-defense, she shot him twice in the chest and abdomen, while Roldan retaliated, firing at her 3 times, striking her in the head and arm. She lost an eye. He was gravely wounded too. At the hospital, Roldan was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and discharging a firearm in an occupied dwelling. Though Vicki survived, the violence was shocking in its scale and cruelty. But what followed was chilling. Vicki revealed that during one argument, Roldan had told her, "I can make people disappear." Those words were a direct echo of the nightmare that had stolen Bethany from her family. When he was finally indicted in North Carolina, he accepted a plea deal in mid-2016. Convicted on felony assault charges, the attempted murder counts were dropped. He received a sentence of 6 to 8 years. Still, investigators in Virginia saw this as pivotal, not peripheral. Loudoun County Sheriff's investigators traveled to North Carolina to question him again. Their message, "Now talk about Bethany." Vicki appeared on Dr. Phil and shared more disturbing insights. Roldan's threats, the pattern of abuse, and his threats to make people vanish were too similar to be ignored. She claimed to hold key information that could link him to Bethany's disappearance. The same year, local news began calling him the last person to see Bethany Decker. Authorities noted, there are no other suspects. Despite the violent optics, the lack of a body kept Bethany's case in limbo. Her family watched helplessly as Roldan would reemerge, first in North Carolina, then back in Virginia in 2020, facing charges for abduction before pleading guilty to second-degree murder in November 2022, based on his confession alone. Yet still, there was no corpse, no murder weapon, and no final proof of what happened after that last afternoon in Ashburn. The danger was no longer just a whisper. Roldan had shown he could follow through. But Bethany's case still had no body, no final chapter, just questions, and a confession drenched in darkness. Nearly a decade after Bethany vanished, her family's grief had become quiet, almost resigned. Yet behind the scenes, something inside the case was stirring. In November 2020, just one day before Ronald Roldan was scheduled to finish his North Carolina prison sentence, something remarkable happened. Loudoun County prosecutors quietly filed abduction charges to extradite him back to Virginia and finally reopen the 2011 investigation. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Authorities had spent years gathering what they couldn't before: digital breadcrumbs, witness testimonies, IP logs, and a deeper understanding of Roldan's patterns. They re-examined hard drives, cross-checked timestamps, and listened again to his inconsistent statements. For the first time, they weren't chasing a light, they were following a digital trail that led to Ronald. For the Decker family, it was a signal. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Their daughter wasn't forgotten. Once extradited, a grand jury returned a chilling indictment. In December 2020, Roldan was charged with second-degree murder even though no remains had been found. The prosecution laid out a theory grounded in digital forensics. The Facebook posts traced to his IP, the abandoned car and silent phone lines, the shifting stories he told investigators, all stitched together into a damning narrative. Still, no body. Not one bone, one hair, one scrap of DNA. Speculation filled the gaps. Court documents revealed that during a recorded interview in January 2023, Roldan claimed Bethany fell during an argument, hit her head on a windowsill, and died instantly. He panicked, not daring to call 911, and instead wrapped her body in a Christmas tree disposal bag and dumped it down the apartment complex compactor, later covering the scene with other trash bags. If true, the compactor could already have shredded her remains, possibly multiple times, into unrecognizable pieces long before searches even began. It was a horrifying thought that the ultimate crime scene had been erased by sanitation. Yet lawyers cautioned the public this was still a confession without confirmation. The state had no body, no autopsy, no direct physical evidence linking Roldan to her death beyond his own testimony. They built their case on motive and means, on inconsistencies, on the pattern of threats and violence, and on his confession in court, no matter how horrifying it was. For the Decker family, this was both vindication and heartbreak. Their daughter was officially considered dead. But with no remains, she couldn't be laid to rest. Her son left with only photos and memories of a mother he never knew. In February 2023, Roldan was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison with an additional 27.5 years suspended. Justice of sorts, but still incomplete. How do you prove murder when there's nothing left? In November 2022, 11 years after Bethany Decker disappeared, the final piece fell into place, in words alone. Ronald Roldan stood before the Loudoun County courtroom and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in her death. There would be no dramatic standoff over remains, no forensics expert parading a body bag, but there was still a confession. Roldan's version: on January 29, 2011, an argument erupted between he and Bethany. She had requested an extra shift at Carrabba's, and something snapped. He shoved her. She lost her balance, fell, and struck her head against a windowsill. In that instant, Roldan said, she stopped breathing. Panic surged. He didn't call for help. Instead, he said he wrapped her in a Christmas tree disposal bag, taped it shut, and carried her body to the apartment complex's trash compactor. There, he deposited her and layered other bags on top to conceal any evidence. That admission was the centerpiece of the plea deal, a plea that would spare him from a life sentence but ensure a lengthy prison term, 12.5 years behind bars, with another 27.5 years suspended. When sentencing came in February 2023, the judge described the confession as definitive answers that she's not disappeared. She has been killed. For Bethany's family, justice arrived in a package they never wanted. Her parents watched as Roldan's words convicted him of murder, but without her body, they were still denied one final human moment, laying their daughter to rest. As her mother confessed outside the courthouse, I can't tell you how hard it was knowing that when Bethany was murdered, she called me. She said, "Mom, I love you." That was the last thing she told me. It's a cruel irony, a confession accepted by the system as truth, yet no body ever recovered. No burial, no sacred space for grief. Instead, the void remains. Roldan's plea was final, but only on paper. He'd carved his truth through his own voice, but was it the whole story? Was his version complete, or just the version that spared him from life in prison? Because without physical proof, without that body, how deep can truth go? What silence still lies in that compactor? What questions remain hidden in collapsed trash? And even as the legal chapter closes, the emotional one refuses to end. But was this confession the truth, or the only version that spared him life in prison? 11 years have passed since that thin January afternoon in 2011 when Bethany Decker vanished from her apartment. Bethany's son, now a teenager, carries a mother he never truly knew. He was only a year old when she disappeared, too small to remember her smile, too young to recall her voice, too young to understand what it means when someone just stops coming home. He grows up with stories, photographs she never held him in, bedtime rituals she never shared, lullabies she never sang, his memories incomplete, and he will reach milestones, birthdays, graduations, first heartbreaks, with her absence echoing louder. As he asks those inevitable questions, what was she like? Why didn't she stay? His family will answer with pieces of a puzzle missing its center. Meanwhile, Bethany's parents wrestle with a unique grief. Their daughter is legally dead. Her killer is in prison, but she's not buried, not physically. A void exists where flesh should have been laid to rest. Instead, they visit empty graves, silent memorials, and advocacy events for domestic violence victims. They have only memory and purpose to hold her name, even as the world moves forward. They've become advocates not just for Bethany, but for others trapped in private violence. Speaking on panels, joining domestic abuse hotlines, urging system reform, they use her memory to fuel change. They speak at LoudounCountyCommission.com events, telling strangers, don't look away. They press for how the justice system treats missing persons, for better police response, better funding, better awareness. Roldan will walk free one day, his sentence 12. 5 years with part suspended likely means release in the mid-2030s. He will exit a prison, a free man, while Bethany's family remains shackled by uncertainty. She will never return. She will never meet her son's high school friends, attend his graduation, smile in wedding photos. Whatever life she might have built is gone, blown away like chalk dust on the wind. And the scars aren't just personal. The community of Ashburn, Fairfax, Loudon live with Bethany's absence too. The crime scene was never secured properly. Neighbors say they remember the hush before the media arrived, before the Facebook chatter died, before arrests and confessions. It became a cautionary tale whispered among friends. Get help early. Notice the bruises. Don't ignore the silence. For every grieving moment her parents endure, there's a family who never learned in time that a person can disappear flawlessly if no one reports them, if no alarm is raised. Bethany taught a lesson in nothingness, a brutal lesson on how quickly a vibrant life can vanish behind a locked door. Justice came, but only after years of waiting. It came through digital forensics and confessions instead of bones and blood. It came through silence and supposition, through internet logs instead of body placement. It came without a body, and it came with limitations. 12.5 years in exchange for silence, negotiation of truth, acceptance of uncertainty. Was justice truly served? 12 years have passed since she disappeared, and still we don't know where Bethany Decker is. Her body has never been found. Her baby was never born into the world. Her son must grow older without her. And the final question remains. In a case built on absence, of evidence, of answers, of a final goodbye, does justice ever feel complete? Do you believe Ronald Roldan told the truth? Do you believe that a young mother, 5 months pregnant, simply fell and died, and that the man who'd once threatened to make people disappear just panicked? Or was that story a shield, crafted carefully, delivered at the right time, to secure a plea deal and shave decades off a life sentence? Because when someone admits to murder, but the victim's body is never found, when there's no grave, no autopsy, no physical proof of how she died or where she ended up, how much of that story can you afford to believe? And if his version is true, how do you throw a human being, too, if you count the baby, into a trash compactor and walk away? The court called it justice, but was it? 12.5 years. That's what Roldan received. Bethany Decker received no mercy, no voice, no funeral. Her son grew up without answers. Her parents still wake up to the same dream, that she might come home, that maybe somehow this isn't real. But it is. She vanished. And now you know what happened, or at least what we've been told. So we're asking you, what do you believe? Did Roldan tell the whole story? Or is there still something he's hiding, something darker, something too horrifying to speak out loud? Was 12 years in prison a sentence worthy of a mother lost forever and a child never born? Comment below. We want to hear what you think. And if you or someone you know is trapped in a relationship where control replaces love, where threats replace trust, where silence becomes the only safety, please, don't wait. Tell someone, leave, call, speak. Bethany didn't get that chance, but someone else still can.